second. Just to give you a sense of line of business split, because that might be of interest to you, that pie chart on the right tells you, when you look at us, the commercial side, what do we do? From your perspective, I would think the part that's most important and interesting is the big blue slice, the 42% slice of casualties. That's where workers' comp is, that's where regular liability is, excess, med mal, the lines that are traditionally the sweet spot for the structured settlement business. That's what we do the most of, that chart is. Interestingly, that's the most challenged part of our business. Right, you look at those other slices, financial lines is a historically profitable line for us. We're really, really good at it. And we make money at it pretty much all around the world on a pretty consistent basis. The only time we don't is every now and then. Financial lines is an interesting business where they have something that's sort of like a cat, right? They sort of have a catastrophe, credit crisis, Euro bonds, whatever. So every now and then something will come along and kind of swamp the boat for the financial lines guys. But when it happens very quickly. It's over. It's a claims-made line, so whenever something happens, they're going to know about it right away. You can account for it, you can price for it for the next cycle. The burden of the casualty world is that for the most part, it's an occurrence line of business where things happen today that we might not actually know about for 5 years, and we may actually pay out for 10, right? And we're always trying to chase, well, what really happened in the, this is 12, so what really happened in the 2005 accident year, because we still don't know for sure, what the ultimate outcomes are going to be on the stuff we wrote in 2005 in that casualty space. Those other two lines, property, obviously you guys don't care about at all. Specialty is an interesting little grab bag for us that has a lot of activity for you in it, because that's where we have aviation, for example, which is a line that traditionally has a lot of structured settlement activity. It's got marine in there, which for us includes some liability work. And it's got our pollution profit center, which also writes a little bit of regular liability that generates structured settlements, and the occasional odd duck transaction in which payout over time has a lot of value even though there's nobody hurt. So every now and then we'll actually land a big one out of that pollution space where we write a $10 or $20 million structure because the nature of what it is we have to pay out matches up nicely with what a structure can do for us. And we try to be creative about that. And Izzy is a tireless advocate on your behalf with my claim people, trying to make sure that they think about in the oddball situations, is there a play for doing deferred payments that makes a better outcome for us and for the other people we're dealing with. One of the things I keep reminding our staff, and I remind my management, because they look at me sideways sometimes when they see some of the things we do, is that one of the things we're not good at as claim people running a P&C operation is saying to ourselves, let's pay this guy, $500 a month for the rest of his life, right? As a claim person with an open file where you'd have to try to figure out a way to do that and not screw it up, right? The odds of successfully executing that with no errors are 0, right? This is never going to happen. We're going to screw it up, right? The claim handler is going to die, he's going to hand the file to somebody else, or his successor will, right? Something's going to happen to mess that up. Where our life partners are brilliant at executing that. We're so much better transferring that risk to them is the execution risk of that transaction. That we're always looking for those kinds of opportunities. And I think also the people in this room are most interested in the U.S. Chartis is a U.S.-centric company. 60% of our activities here. So this is our U.S. results. And here I extended it further back in time so you could see the effect of 2008. So you look at that top line, running across the page, we were $23.6 billion in 2008. And you see that drop pretty sharply to 20. That's what happened post September of 08. You can tell we bottomed out in the 18s, and that's where we are now. Very clearly, the U.S. platform is stable. To the extent that we shrink now, it's going to be on purpose. And we don't intend to shrink much, actually. We think we've done most of the remediation we need to do on most of our businesses, and we can start to grow the thing. I will note, though, if you look at that combined ratio line across those slides, there's some pretty ugly numbers on there. That's due to a couple things. One is we had some cat activity in that period of time which can push the number up, but the other is when we remediate a business in the P&C business, one of the things that invariably ends up happening is getting a better understanding of what we're really going to pay, what our ultimates are going to be, and then assessing those sums versus what we're holding in reserves, both case reserves and IBNR, and discovering that it ain't enough, right? That we've underestimated at some point in the process, so we have to put up more, right? So those are prior year reserve charges make a mess out of these numbers, right? Because we're having to put money up in a current time period to cover stuff we wrote 5 or 10 years ago. That comes right out of earnings, that goes right into the combined ratio number, and makes your results look ugly. We've had a fair amount of that activity over the last few years, and you can see the outcome of it there. And nonetheless, after all that, you go down to the second from the bottom line. Policyholder surplus, so that's the amount of money we have, X of cost and everything else. We're still running actually greater than what we had in 2008. So now I want to talk about my operation a little bit, Chartis Claims. This is not actually a photo, in case you were wondering. We are an interesting beast in that our distribution of claims by size or by severity is weird compared to most of our competitors. Most places look at that as sort of a pyramid where you have way more claims down low, way more small claims, and then fewer claims as you go up, and at the very top with really big claims you don't have very many, right? So it's a typical kind of pyramid distribution. We almost invert that. We have some frequency business. We do some primary comp, we do some primary liability, we do some commercial auto. But it's as you go up the severity chain that we gain in scale, we gain in market share, and frankly, we gain in expertise. So what you see with us are big departments with lots of expertise at the big stuff, right? D&O, med mal, excess casualty, airlines, right? Those kinds of activities are where our sweet spot is. Those happen to be ones, for the most part, that play well into your industry, and where structured settlements are a big and valuable tool for us. That's one of the reasons that I am a passionate supporter of the tool, is I know how well it makes the resolution process go in those lines. But it also means that we strive in the selection and training of our staff for people who are pretty tough, right? You're going to be handling millions of dollars per transaction. You cannot be a wallflower. Right? You cannot shrink from conflict. And in fact, we have an institutional ethic that says if it's our money, we expect our claim person to be in charge of that transaction. And our sense is if we see them, if we detect that they're delegating their responsibilities to third parties, we get pretty upset about that. Whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a structured settlement consultant, or anybody else, that's not how we intend to do business. We intend to have our person be fully responsible for the outcome and to be hands-on. I don't think you can do this business with lots of zeros at the end per case and behave otherwise and do well. But it does mean you will from time to time get a certain attitude out of our people. That's something that, some days I tolerate, some days I cherish, and some days I loathe when they're aiming it at me. Because you imagine what's like managing these people. They are an unruly and difficult group to manage because they do argue for a living and they like arguing with everybody and they don't know when to turn it off, right? So they're an interesting bunch, but it is a fun bunch to work with. And I believe, subjectively, someday I'll figure out a way to prove this, that in those lines of business that I talk about, they're the best in the business. I'm absolutely confident when I say that it's true, but I wish I could prove it somehow. So here's a typical claim mediation for us. As you can tell, we do a lot of multi-party stuff. This is actually, what's interesting about this one is it's a real one, and I can actually show you who's who here. So let's see here. All right, that's my guy there, and I'm liking his tactical position on this case right now. It looks like it's going well for him, because that's the plaintiff lawyer. Over there, that's the mediator. He's trying to help out. And then last, let's see, there he is. That guy's running for the bills. Give us credit, we have one there, right? He's in the room. That's how we want it, right? We want you guys in the room when this is going on, because we find that to be helpful. Now, this is an interesting shot. I'm a big a user of Google when I put together my slideshows. So I figure, when you think about our program, it's personified by Izzy Acevedo. So I go onto Google Images, and all I do is I type in Izzy Acevedo. This is what comes up. And I'm not kidding you. This is what really comes up. This is the first hit in Google Images under Izzy Acevedo. I don't know why. All right? I am puzzled by this. I don't know what to think of it. But when I saw it, I felt like, you know, this is something you guys want to know. Okay, this is more stuff about our program and that is likewise real. So this is the amounts that we have paid in claim payments out as annuity premium over the last 4 years plus 8 months. It's remarkably flat, right? You look at that and you know, those numbers don't vary by much. That 2012 year-to-date number, if it plays out the way we think, will be the largest on the board. You know, we're shooting for about 750 for the year. This set of numbers here to me is a testament to the work of Izzy and his team, Kathy Martin and the rest, and our claim people, that in the face of all kinds of headwinds regarding both us, you know, some of our casualty lines getting smaller over this period of time, so my actual claim payouts come down a little. My workers' comp book has shrunk dramatically over that period of time, and that's a sweet spot for the tool. So with that getting much smaller, and all these other things going on, and you know, yields being where they are, you know, business reputation for us and some of the other people in the big insurance space being what they are, and for all of that going on, these numbers to be as stable as they've been over the last few years, I think is a pretty remarkable set of outcomes, and that I primarily attribute to Izzy and the work he does keeping our people on task with the use of the tool. But I'll tell you, I'm not satisfied with these numbers. As I look at my business, I do think we're about to turn a corner on workers' comp. I will tell you, you know, if you watch those commercials during the sporting events for IBM, you know, that building a smarter planet stuff, you know, where they talk about how the muffin shop knows to build, you know, to make lemon muffins on rainy days, and, you know, all that kind of crazy shit. I suppose that was an inappropriate phrase. I apologize for that. I should have warned you up front. A, I'm not going to wear a tie, and B, I'm going to say some stuff I'm not supposed to say. So we'll get that out of the way. We've gone all in on analytics at AIG and at Chartis. And I got to tell you, I was as skeptical a guy as there was in the house when what we call the science people showed up. That's their official title. I don't know why we don't want to call them analytics, because that's what they do. But their ability to look at a giant mountain of data and tease out the one or two variables that really matter, and from that give you valuable business perspective to get better at what you do, is pretty damn amazing. That IBM commercial stuff is true, right? And the biggest single example I have of that is workers' comp, where they have built for us a risk selection model that we're just about to the point of saying can be completely operational, and with that we think we can write comp profitably enough to scale up again, right? So, you know, we've run our guaranteed cost comp book in the U.S. down from $3 billion and change in premium down to about $700 million bucks, right? That's how much shrink we've had over, you know, from, I want to say 07 or 06 to now. And, you know, it's to use our management phrase, right? It's no fun trying to shrink your way to greatness, right? That hardly ever works. So as we've been running it down, we've been looking for the key to when can we grow it back up, because the joy of comp is, you know, everybody's got to buy it. Right, there's always going to be a market for it. If you can figure out how to do it well, you know, then you can get scale. You can do all kinds of cool things. We think we're about there. We think we're going to be able to get back into comp in a pretty big way, in a way that ought to impact these numbers that will be meaningful for this. So I've told Izzy I don't think it's that far away to where we can seriously look at this program and say it can be $1 billion program. Right, that we can be moving $1 billion through the annuity process on its way to claimants and plaintiffs. I really believe that. That's sort of my career goal in this space. You know, and I don't have that many years left doing it, so, you know, I'm hoping, you know, I'll get to see that number up on this screen at some point. And I will tell you, there were times in this, especially as we were going through our own troubles, where a lot of my people were like, do we really want to do this anymore? You know, is this worth the trouble? It brings us additional headaches in the mediation room. It's just so much easier to just talk cash. And so we've had to do a little bit of nudging and cajoling and cheerleading through the staff to keep them on task, but I think this shows that we've been pretty good at that. So why, right? Why those numbers? Right? Because I talk to my peers, to the extent I'll acknowledge that I have peers, right? I'm conceited about that, but there's guys like me at other carriers. And I will tell you, right? I don't sense from them that they value the tool as much as we do. I especially sense it, by the way, on those carriers that had a life company and don't anymore. Those guys seem to leave vapor trails running away from the tool. And for me, it's a huge disappointment. It shows to me kind of a lack of clarity in what their thinking must have been before, that with that institutional change, all of a sudden they don't give a shit anymore. Again, sorry. But that's how they behave. And it's, to me, it's a big disappointment because it means they were never doing it for the right reasons in the first place, and they never really understood what they were doing. They were doing it because it was a check-the-box thing inside their company. And that's not where we are. We do this because we think it's a massively valuable tool in, first of all, helping us get what every claim person cherishes, right? A closed file, right? Closed files are things of beauty if you're a claim person. Even better is a closed file at the right price, right? Where you feel good about the work you did and you got an outcome that you think is right. And especially in the severity space, especially in the complicated stuff we do, it is the best tool out there for having those conversations. Right? We're sitting across from a plaintiff lawyer who wants to put on the table some stupid large life care plan that everybody in the room knows is nonsense, right? It's got all kinds of crazy, stupid assumptions in it, right? And yet, right, with this tool, we can cut through that a lot and say, look, we'll put something on the table that we think takes care of the life care plan, so we can stop talking about that. And we can go back to talking about the case, and we can go back to talking about liability, and we can go back to talking about the other things your client needs in order for us to get a signature, right? Without spending so much time talking about why you're buying, you know, skin cream in tiny little tubes because you can get a higher unit cost that way, you know, times 50 years, right? Which we know you do when you do these life care plans, right? So we can just take the life care plan out of the play and move on and really talk about the case. Right? It does things like that for us. It calls people's bluffs on crazy assumptions, right? You got a guy who's a high quad, and yet you want to tell me he's going to be, you know, he should have a lost wage stream that goes out 50 years and he's going to have, you know, medical bills for 50 years, right? You and I both know that's not going to happen. So fine, we'll get a rated age, right? We'll take on the lifespan risk and put it in there, and then we're done talking about it. Right? It makes the process go better. You know, and we do feel a sense of responsibility towards seeing that the resolution of our cases is a right and fair one to the plaintiff's needs, so long as they're being, you know, reasonable with us, right? We want a deal that works best for everybody, right? And this does that. We see a lot of plaintiffs, right, who are not, you know, terribly sophisticated people, right? That's a euphemism to describe a lot of the plaintiffs we see. But, you know, they're not, right? You don't want to entrust these people with large sums of cash. It's a bad idea. Right? You can just see that it's a story that's going to have a bad ending when you do that. Right? I remember reading a study, you know, when lotteries first got big and we first started to see these really big jackpots. Somebody went back after about 5 years of that, look at how these people's lives have played out. Right? And it wasn't a happy set of stories. Right? Very few of them behaved with that money in ways that you or I would think were responsible. And same thing with the people we're dealing with. So we want an ending that makes sense. Right? We want one that is stable and has this person getting out of that transaction what it is they need. Right? This tool does that brilliantly, and we think that's the best. It's the best thing for everybody. That said, right? We do have a reputation, and it's not Izzy's fault. It's mine, right? Of being awfully particular about how we do this, right? It's because this tool presents to me, to the company, transactional risk that is real and is a problem. Right? You just heard, you know, 2 presenters ago talking about executive life. Right? I'm going to have to pay some claim files over again because of that. I cannot tell you how small our tolerance is for that. Right? It's infinitesimal. Right? If there's one thing I want, it's that when I pay a claim, it stays paid, right? I close it, it's over, I never hear about it again. And therefore, institutionally, I have zero tolerance for anything that poses a risk to me, that claim may come back. So when people want to start to get creative in the space about deal structures in ways that I look at and say, 5 years, 10 years from now, right, this could end badly. My next thought is, and if that happens, right, even if it's a small probability, a very small probability, if that happens, who's that person going to go shooting at? Right? And my next question is, well, who's going to be around? Right? Who's going to be left for them to shoot at 10 years from now? And I think about all the deal partners we have in these transactions, and what I see for the most part are a bunch of ephemeral entities, right? Plaintiff lawyers, right? They're going to shoot at their plaintiff lawyer because he did a stupid deal for them 10 years later. How many plaintiff lawyers are in business 10 years post-deal, right? They have no institutional longevity at all. They're going to go after the plaintiff broker, same answer, right? That's a non-starter. And so who's left, right? The defense side of the table. They're going to shoot at my policyholder. Well, guess where they're going, right? They're coming back to me. No, so they're going to shoot at my policyholder. They're going to shoot at me. Right? And I'm going to be talking 10 years from now about a case that I thought I had settled and closed, and that I told my company I had settled and closed. So my appetite for that conversation 10 years from now, and having to go back to the company and saying, remember how I told you structured settlements were a good idea? Remember how I told you, that doing things with deferred payments was wise and good and right? Well, okay, here was the hidden price. Some of these things are coming back to bite us. Okay, that's a conversation that I have no appetite for. And therefore, you will see Izzy on our behalf and me and the other people we have around these deals being very particular, being very rigorous about how we execute. And if that's a problem, I apologize in the sense that I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? But it's always going to be that way, right? Zero tolerance for that risk. So anytime somebody's in the room and they suggest something that we think is going to cause us that problem, we can't go there. So what's coming? And now here, these are observations of somebody who's been around the business a while, right? But I don't have a crystal ball, so these are just personal opinions. Yields, right? I look at yields on your behalf and on behalf of my claim files the way I look at pricing on behalf of my underwriters, right? They would love to have a hard market where all of a sudden they could get a boatload more rate. A hard market lifts all boats, right? Makes even lousy underwriters look like geniuses. So too with high yields for this group, right? Imagine what a lovely world it would be, if all of a sudden yields went up, double, right, back to where they were a while back, right? We all remember those days. We didn't know how good we had. But I don't see anything on the horizon to make that happen. When I hear our internal people talking, I don't hear them planning on it. Right? I sat through a presentation with some Merrill Lynch people. They're analysts, the analysts assigned to us. Right? And there's two of them because we're too big to have one. So they have a P&C guy and a life guy. And the Merrill Life analyst says his first question for any life company that he's grilling is, what's your business plan for low yields forever? And if he gets back an answer that's squishy, like they haven't thought about it, they're not ready for it, they're not organizationally stable to deal with it, right? Downgrade. Because that's his view. For all intents and purposes, we should assume low yields forever. Continued diversification of funding sources. I'm not even sure what I meant by that. This is what I get for doing these things late at night. I think that was a 3-beer bullet point. So we'll come back to that. I'm sure it'll come to me. A business environment that rewards scale. This is something that I do know what I mean, and I'm pretty serious about it. Your business, my business, all of the big players that touch these transactions are all in worlds where scale will make you better at what you do. Scale gives you the ability to afford better tools. Scale gives you the ability to afford better people. Scale is going to be where it's at. P&C, life, consulting. So I see consolidation coming. I see some in P&C, I see some in life. So we're sort of getting consolidation by default in the life space is by people running away from this product, even without actual entity consolidation. And then I see consolidation in your industry. I don't see how you as an industry survive as a series of little cottage shops. I see the little guys failing all the time. I just don't think you've got the scale and the resources to do the job. So my guess would be if we were back in this room 5 years from now, the entity count represented by you folks will be, 2/3 of what it is now, and if you're 5 years later, it'll be half of that. Because I just don't see how a little entity can afford the investments you've got to make to be any good. Continued pressure for the industry to reach a stable operating model. Now, this is something I've been observing for a while, right? That I'm sure is very close to your hearts in a very painful way. Is this plaintiff versus defense fight that's been going on the broker side now for a while. I look at it and it just looks crazy to me. Not crazy that there are multiple brokers on a transaction. I get that, right? But crazy in the sense that the two of you representing the industry go in, and the first thing you do is attack each other's, credibility and legitimacy. Right? That's crazy, right? Because it splashes on everybody else in the room. It splashes on the tool. It splashes on the whole transaction. Right? So how we have people in this business whose business model is to crap on the model, right? I just don't get. Sooner or later, you guys have to get to a stable modus vivendi where you understand one another's impulses and motivations, and you are deal-oriented in that everybody wants a deal, right? So I look at real estate, and I say, that's the way it is there. There's a plaintiff broker and there's a buyer broker and a seller broker, right? Do they each go in and crap on the whole idea of buying real estate? Right? They do not. They have figured out that behaving that way is wrong, and they have figured out a stable way to coexist with one another in a way that they're all oriented toward the same thing, right? Getting a deal. Right? This business has to get there, and that means there's got to be grown-ups all around, and I get that, there's a shortage of that right now in some segments of this business, but it's got to get there. Right? You can't continue to have people playing in this space whose main conduct, whose main play, is to crap on their own product. I will never understand that. And with yields where they are, going to be this way for a long time, I see continuing temptation to drag other kinds of financial products into the play. Right? That scares me. Because I go back to my tolerance for risk, and I see people trying to chase two things. They're chasing yield, and they're chasing income in ways that create transactional risk. Right? So first of all, we all get, right, yield comes with risk. That's a trade. There's no getting away from it. You're gonna go out and try to grab greater yield. You're gonna pay a price for it. There's no such thing as free yield. So if you go there, you need to go there with your eyes open and say, what is the transactional risk I'm assuming here? What am I picking up? Right? And understand, at my end of the transaction, I got no tolerance for that additional risk. None. Right? So I'm going to be a guy saying, I don't want to go there. Right? And if you try to shoehorn us into a transaction with riskier kinds of investment instruments in it, we're going to say we're out. We're going to pay cash. We're going to walk away so that when that deal blows up, right, our fingerprints aren't on. Going back to my pay once. And then I see people also going that route because it's a greater income stream for them, right? It's a richer commission play. And while I understand that impulse, again, I'm not going along for that ride. So, anybody's got that in their minds, they're doing it without us. Right? And I think we come to this from a fair perspective as somebody who thinks well of the industry and wants it to do well, right? But I ain't going on that ride. This is my life, right? I get yelled at by guys like this all the time. So that's sort of the short view of where my head is at regarding our business. We try very, very, very hard to make sure that every deal that ought to be structured is. We've got new tools coming online. I talked about those analytics guys. We're going to roll out a new claim system in the U.S. next year. It's going to have a filter built into it. Right? It looks for attributes of a claim that ought to be structured. And if it sees those, right, it will start sending messages to people saying, hey, I see that you have a claim that looks structurable, but you haven't made an assignment. You haven't put a consultant on it. How come? And oh, by the way, right, we copy your manager on this little automated message, right? This case is going to be on a list, right? And it's going to be on a list where he or she will be asking you questions about why not, right? So be prepared for that conversation. We think that's a pretty powerful thing to make sure that all the right cases are in the hopper, right? Izzy's been bugging me to get that thing built for about 5 years, and you know, I finally got the money to build it, and we finally have the analytical resources to get those filters right. So we're pretty encouraged that our execution will be better, right? Because right now we have some people in our shop that just, you know, for whatever reason have an attitude about the tool, right? And so they don't do it. And, you know, we can kind of get at that anecdotally, but it's better to get at it in a nice systematic way. So we're not, right? That's one of those scale plays I talk about. You can afford building stuff like that when you can blast the cost of it over a zillion transactions, or you can't if you're small. And it's just, I think, a sign that, you know, the fact that we're willing to spend that money tells you what we think of the space. Right? And I will tell you, frankly, you know, am I self-interested in this? I am. Right? I think this tool, at the end of the day, saves the P&C carriers some money too. Right? And by the way, not necessarily on the cases we structure. Right? To me, it adds a discipline to the negotiating process that I think is the positive outcome I want, whether the deal ends up structured or not. It's the fact that now we're talking about matching up payment streams and forms of damage and need, rather than just throwing a number back and forth, right, to get you better outcomes. But that's, you know, that's our institutional view. So with that, that's the view from AIG / Chartis / whatever I'll be called tomorrow. Questions for us?
Over here, right?
Yeah.
Are qualified assignments valid transaction contracts in your view?
Yes. Yeah, if they weren't, I'd be doing a lot less of this. Absolutely. I sense there's a subtext behind that question that goes beyond your question and my answer, and I'm dying to hear what it is.
Is the hold harmless language in that contract valid enough for you to go off your approved list?
No. Off my approved list, no. And going back to transactional risk, right? The approved list is one of my tools for making sure I control risk. So I'm very rigorous about that. When I see deals getting weird is when I have people, when I don't have somebody in the room who's highly invested in making sure that the transaction is structurally appropriate. So when I don't have one of my guys in the room, historically, weird shit starts to happen, right? And my tolerance for weird shit, again, is 0, right? So it's a, you know, for me, it's a control mechanism toward that. And it's just one of the ways I make sure the deal's done. So that's my rule.
Another aspect of your transactional, another aspect of transactional risk tolerance is the issue in our industry about single claim in 468B trust, and I would appreciate if the entire group would hear the Chartist position on that.
Yeah, and you come at it from the right perspective. Right? That again, for me, that's a risk point. There's enough uncertainty and ambiguity regarding how the world will end on single claim in 468B that I can still, you know, without having to think very hard about it, look down the road and say, 10 years from now, right, are we going to have a bunch of claimants who thought they had a tax-free deal but don't? Because the IRS eventually didn't go their way. They got audited. You know, that process unwound in a way unfavorable to the plaintiff position on that issue. And if that happens, right, which I do not think is a science fiction thing to imagine, if that happens, what are they going to do? Right? They're going to sue somebody. Right? They're not just going to pay the bill. Right? This is America. Right? Nobody just pays the bill. They sue somebody. Right? If they didn't have that worldview, I wouldn't have a gig. They're going to sue somebody. Who are they going to sue? Right? Everybody on the plaintiff side of that transaction will be long gone when that day comes. Right? Will still be there. And I can try to paper that transaction 15 ways from Sunday saying, we said not to do it, we said it was a bad idea. Yeah, but you know, the check we issued was to USF, we knew. Right? Our fingerprints are on that deal. And I'm going to have to go into a courtroom and say, well, we didn't really want to, but they made me. Right? I'll get laughed out of there, and they made me, right? They'll pull up those numbers I showed you at the beginning. Say, how does anybody make me do a transaction the way I don't want to do it? Right? You know, 20 or 30 billion in premium, all this money, right? If I'm in that room, if I'm writing a check to a QSF that I don't think I should have, right? I'm a volunteer too, and I deserve what happens. So I have, we have a very strong institutional viewpoint on that. The ambiguity around those transactions is unhealthy, and we ain't going there, and we will fight to the bitter end on that point so long as we don't have clarity. I know that's not a terribly welcoming kind of answer. You ask a question and I get on my horse, I start barking at you, and I realize in terms of trying to get more questions, that's really not the way I'm supposed to do it. Because that's where that passion thing comes out, right? You got me worked up. So there you go. But that's where he gets it from, right? It ain't him, it's me. Usually.
It's him.
All right, just for that, we're going to go back for a minute. There we go. We're going to leave that slide up as I'm done.
Is that going to pop up? Is that picture going to pop up on that little chart when it says if you have a structured settlement and manager? Because I think that would be a great.
I am only now starting to think of the possibilities for the use of this image. But rest assured, this will not be the only time that this image surfaces in the course of my work. It's just too good not to go to. What else? I promise not to bark at the next one. Unless you provoke me. All right. It seems I
have a question, Rick. Your perspectives on your competition are I think, right on, obviously. I'm curious if you could go into a little more detail. Why you think your competitors don't want to do as much structure as you do?
That now we kind of get into the realm of psychoanalysis there. But I'll say this, right? It's more work. You start there, right? It's more work for the claim handler. It's more work for everybody around the transaction than just paying cash. And much as I love and cherish each and every claim person in the industry, we're not big on signing up for more work. So it is something you have to push at. You have to have an institutional view that it's worth it in order to keep pushing people in the direction of using the tool intelligently. Now, some of our people pick it up because they get it, right? And you work with them and it's a joy. But for most, that's just not how they approach it. It's just another task and they run onto it. So you have to push. You have to have a high-end institutional view of the tool. And because it's a difficult proof, I in my heart am sure that the company is financially better off for being committed to the tool. I have no doubt about that. Can I prove that? Not a chance. Right? Maybe someday with these analytics guys, we'll figure out a way to build a multivariate model that figures it out, right? But we haven't yet. We're not, it's not on the pipeline to even try. So it's a difficult sale to management because inevitably they say, well, can you prove that? Right? In my conversation with them, I say, no, absolutely not. I cannot prove that. You're just stuck taking my word for it, taking my best judgment as somebody who's been doing this for a long time that I'm sure that it's worth it, right? But that's a hard conversation. And so if the top of the house isn't committed, then just sort of drift and inertia and people's willingness, their desire to solve their task in the easiest way will take over, and you'll end up where I think a lot of our competition is. Right? And all you gotta do is see what happens, you know, like I said, for a lot of them who were committed, it was because they had life bolted to them. And when that went away, you saw where their heads really were. Right? But you know, when we went through the events we've had in the last 4 years, I got questions there for a while, every day. Right? Where our people could had in their heads an ultimate outcome where we wouldn't have a life company bolted to us. There was a significant period of time where we didn't think that was going to be the outcome. And I was getting questions all the time. Are we still going to do structures? Right. And, you know, and Izzy can attest to this because he was in the room for a lot of this, and a lot of it was webcasts and town halls and that other stuff. And I kept saying what I believe to be true, which is, yes, we are, because that's not why we do them. We do them for the, you know, we do them because it's the right thing to do for your case and for our portfolio, regardless of who the life carrier is. You know, and our life carrier, our internal penetration numbers have gone up and down over the last 4 years. So what? Right? You know, well, I like putting money in Mike's pocket. You know, if it didn't, it didn't. Right? We're still going to do the right thing for the right reason. But you know, so why some of these other companies have behaved that way? I don't get it. I talk to them, and they're just so lukewarm. They're just it baffles me. Right, there's a lot of people making it look like I think I'm supposed to be done. So we'll take that hint. Actually, do have one more slide. No offense. Have a marvelous meeting. Thank you.
That was terrific.